Welcome back to the Marvel Movie Minute, a daily podcast in which we dig in deep to analyze the films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe 1 minute at a time. I'm Andy Nelson from thenextreel.com. We are, of course, looking at Jon Favreau's 2008 film, Iron Man. And joining me today, we have Jared Abrahamson, a periodic guest host on the Epic Marvel podcast. Hey, Jared.
Hey, Andy. How's it going?
Good. Thanks for joining me this week. I'm looking forward to having you on the show to chat a little bit about Iron Man.
Yeah. This is quite a fun movie, and what better way to talk about it than talk about every single last second of it.
Exactly. Why not? I say. We are looking at minute 71 today. And in this minute, it starts with Tony offering to fire Pepper, and it ends with Pepper explaining Tony to himself. We're in a good moment, I think, for kind of some interesting relationship building going on between Pepper and Tony in these next few minutes. It's nice seeing the interaction between these two characters, and just kind of getting a sense of their relationship, which I think is portrayed pretty nicely here.
Yeah, that's true. This is a nice minute. I guess it's the relationship minute, you could say, or they're dancing mostly the whole time, and yeah, the lovey-dovey minute, I guess.
It's a nice it's a good way to kind of play their relationship, where you're getting this sense of he's her boss, but as she says, you couldn't tie your shoes without me, and proving to him he doesn't even know his own social security number. It's a weird view, I think, that he has on the world. It is very much that Elon Musk sort of thing, where he's just thinking of things that are so big that all these trivial things about actually running a life and making sure that it works are managed. And of course, he does have Pepper for that, and I think that she is proving pretty well here that he really needs to have her around, because he doesn't even know his own social security number.
Oh, he knows the number 5.
He's got the number 5.
So
yeah, it's a very funny moment, the way that plays off, which I think it's pretty funny. What's interesting, this is an odd little thing in the script. She actually rattles off his entire social security number for him, which I find strange. I'm like, is that something that they thought that they would actually do? She says 119645484, and I'm like, I'm surprised that they would have thought that, yes, let's put an entire social security number in the film. Now, granted, I don't think they can do anything with it unless the name is attached to it that it belongs to. And I'm certainly not going to go poking around on the dark web to try to figure out whose social security number that is.
It's mine. No, just kidding.
Oh, hey, there we found the person. Right. That would have been a really weird moment if it actually was your social. What's funny about it is that the social security number, it's actually 119, which is coded for New York. So now it's not necessarily, you're not necessarily born there. That's where you were when you were registered. But at least we know that as a kid, his family was living in New York. So to a certain extent, they were trying to keep that part of the Tony Stark character within the kind of context of the overall story, even if it wasn't the whole film wasn't taking place there. Were you a reader of Iron Man comics?
I haven't really read too much Iron Man. I've read a couple of the Epic collections that have been released, but I hadn't read anything before the movie came out. I've mostly read X-Men and Spider-Man and that kind of stuff. But
right.
I was aware of Iron Man, but I didn't know his story, I guess.
He's an interesting character, and he's one that I've grown more fond of over the years, but largely because of the films. I had never read Iron Man, and so it's nice to it's nice to kind of find who this character is through here, but then also fill in a lot of the backstory with the comics, because I think that he's such an interesting character, the way that he's been written and has evolved over the years in the comic books.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's interesting reading some of the comics, both before the movie came out and afterwards. He was much more of a serious character before the movie. And then, and now afterwards, it's all, he's written more like how Robert Downey Jr. is in the comics.
We've talked about how Robert Downey Jr. is very much like Tony Stark. Like, he embodies Tony Stark because he kind of, his life seems so Tony Starkish in some ways.
Yeah.
But you bring up an interesting point. That is certainly something that I think Robert Downey Jr. brought to the character that wasn't necessarily there beforehand. I mean, he had kind of that Marvel comic sense of humor, and there was that kind of bit in there, but I don't think it nearly had the level that it did until he came along. And I think that actually kind of set a mark for the films of the MCU, period.
Oh yeah, absolutely. They're all the films, I think, are more jokey than their comic counterparts. But I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I pretty much love all the MCU movies. So.
Well, and because I mean, I know you're a big X-Men fan.
Yeah.
Those films strike me as like a much more serious take on kind of the world of the comic books. Like, they don't have as much just kind of that jovial sense of humor that these ones do.
Right. Yeah. And
at least to my recollection. I mean, maybe I'm misremembering them.
Well, they have some moments, but for the most part, it's much more serious, and actually, I think even more serious than the comics were.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Well, I guess mostly it's like not as bright and colorful as everyone's wearing leather suits and all that, but but you know what I mean.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, and I think they even had that fun little nod in one of them where they're wearing those kind of, I can't remember, like the yellow and blue suits or whatever. They're like, why are we wearing these? Or whatever. They make a little joke about those.
Yeah.
Which was pretty funny. So this is this interesting moment between boss and employee. But it's an interesting relationship because we've seen them kind of building this relationship over the film. We've had a moment earlier where he has her help him install the new arc reactor in his chest. Mm-hmm. And he has that moment where it's like, I don't have anybody, you're it. And that's where the connection began. And then we have her gift him the old arc reactor in that little box. And now we have this moment that is this, as she says, totally weird, and he says totally harmless. But they have this look in each other's eyes, and you get a sense that there is a connection there. And I like that about this. I think it's an interesting beat in their relationship.
Yeah. Their relationship in this movie. It feels like it grows naturally, as and it's not like she becomes the girlfriend at the end just for the sake of having a love story. I mean, there's not a whole lot in the movie of that, but there's, certainly an element. Yeah.
The Marvel films have been tough on women characters, unfortunately. This is another of those films that doesn't necessarily pass the Bechdel test because, you do have two women talking to each other, at least. You have the scene where Pepper and Christine are talking after Christine wakes up in Tony's bed. But then they're kind of talking about Tony, so it doesn't quite pass.
And the taking out the trash line.
Yeah, exactly. Which is a great line, but it is, it would be nice if there were more strong characters in a lot of these earlier Marvel films. It's crazy to me that it took them 10 years to really start, letting women lead some of them.
Yeah. Well, I think that's partly because I think in the 90s when Marvel was bought by the Toy Biz, the action figure company, they found that the female action figures did not sell as well as the guy ones, so they started to try and downplay women to a large extent.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You think it all came from their understanding of their audience based on the toy sales?
I think so. I think that I'm sure that's not all of it, but I'm sure that's factors in.
Well, and I don't think that the way that the superhero movie market had been set up over the decades before, there were male superheroes and they made good films with those characters, and they were successes. And there weren't many female superheroes that they used to make feature films. And if they did, they often weren't that successful, or they were the ones who were wearing outfits that might as well pass as bikinis, and that kind of thing.
Yeah,
I
Halle
mean,
Berry's Catwoman.
Right, and what was the one with Ben Affleck's wife?
Elektra, yeah.
And even going back before that, like Supergirl. I mean, granted, she had an actual normal superhero suit, I guess, as far as like the Superman of the era, the same type of just skin tight outfit. It's not like a bikini, but still, I don't know how popular that was. It certainly wasn't as popular as the Superman films were. So I think that sadly, it was one of those, also a historical thing where they looked back on the history of superhero films and said, you know what, it's the female films have never quite taken off as well or been as strong. And I think they just didn't know how to do it. And I think it's taken them a while to figure it out. I'm just glad that they have.
Yeah. Do you think some of that comes with from not having any female like writer directors or even, I don't know, producers or whatever, like people in charge making decisions on these films?
To a certain extent, I think that there certainly is something to that. Having people find characters that they connect with, who they want to use to tell their stories, I think is certainly a strong thing that can lead them to projects that they connect with more. And some of these people, I think, are just connecting with these characters because they're more familiar to them. And you look at the female superheroes that stand out. And even thinking about the X-Men superheroes, the X-Men, the Marvel superheroes, they've had quite a few female superheroes over the years. And I don't know, I guess it just strikes me that none of them really have stood out to people to do something with before now. But, and also I think a lot of it is in the early days, comic books seemed to be kind of written for teenage boys, and the female characters were a little bit like we talked about Pepper and how she was written in those early issues, and it's embarrassing to read now. It's so bad.
Yeah.
I mean, it's of its time, but I would hate to read that with my daughter now or let her read it, because it just is like, I don't want you to be like that.
Right. Well, and I mean, it's the same thing with the early Fantastic Four or X-Men or Ant-Man and the Wasp. all the female characters are all not realistic.
So I think it's taken them time to find the right storytellers to tell their stories. And going back to this minute, I am at least glad that they made Pepper a much stronger character in the films, even if it's not passing the Bechdel test, even if it's something where they do end up kind of having a connection and falling for each other. I like that it's not necessarily about just saving the girl and being with a different girl in the next movie or whatever, like James Bond or something. It just feels like, it's a little better of a relationship here. And they could have totally gone down the road with a comic book where Pepper just was like swooning over Tony all the time. And I don't think it would have held up nearly as well. I think it works a lot better here because the way that Gwyneth Paltrow plays it, she's so kind of uncomfortable with this whole idea. And I think she brings that level that we need to the character that helps us set Tony in a much more grounded world. He's not necessarily grounded, but at least we can see, the perspective through her eyes of him. And I think that it helps a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah. So we go from this moment, and then we follow them as they go outside to get some air. Now, we get this strange shot of Coulson. Now, Coulson, we know, is there. He's already had a conversation with Tony before Tony, and set up a meeting with Tony before Tony went off and connected with Pepper. But this is one of those edits that it's one of the weaker edits in the film. And the film, I think, has really strong transitions from scene to scene. This is one where I feel it never has worked for me. We cut to Coulson still standing up at the bar, and it looks like he's glowering. Like, I don't understand what his look is, but he's kind of got this odd look on his face, like he's studying them. I can't tell if Tony kind of left him saying, "Let me go talk to my assistant and we'll confirm everything." And like, is he waiting for them to come back? I don't know. I struggle reading his face.
Yeah, it just seems like there's no reason to cut to him at that moment, because it doesn't play into anything that happens later at all. I mean, the Coulson and Pepper team up at the end of the movie, but it has nothing to do with this scene, really. So I don't know. Do you think maybe they just used that shot to hide them going out of the building or whatever? They felt like they didn't get coverage on something, and they're just using that to cut away?
I mean, that's my best guess. Like they didn't have a good enough transition out of that scene or into the next scene, because the next scene starts. It's not like they walk onto the balcony. Like, they're already standing on the balcony mid-conversation, basically.
Right.
So it's almost like they shot it in a way where they didn't have the right way to connect it, and so they just had to throw this in here. And I don't know. One, I find Coulson's look odd. Like, why is he just staring at them now? And two, the bartender on the right, like, just, I don't know. He always distracts me. He's like so smiley, and there's nothing wrong with it. It just feels like an odd choice to throw in here. And I just feel like it was they were stuck with it. That's what I feel every time I look at this. Like, well, we're stuck with this shot because we don't have a better way to move from the interior to the exterior.
Yeah, because I don't know what he could be thinking, or it doesn't even matter. Yeah, it's
the last time we'll see him, though, because at this particular party. So I guess they go outside and he must give up and just leave.
Right. Like, oh, you blew me off. You're not really talking about that. Yeah.
Right. So they go outside and they continue their conversation about being weird versus being harmless. He says everyone's dancing, no one's watching. She's lost her objectivity. And I think she brings up a really good point. She's like, you're you. Everyone knows who you are and how he is with girls. And I think this is actually a really valid point to bring up from Pepper, because if she is having any sort of romantic inclinations for Tony, it's this idea of who Tony is and who people think he is and expect him to be, that all of a sudden is going to be leading people to interpret who she is, and that she's just sleeping with the boss or whatever, or that she's just another victim. However it is, I think it's definitely an interesting thing that is worth thinking about for her. I mean, why would she want to fall for him and connect with him, knowing how many women she has cleaned up for him after? It's like, I mean, she's there after Christine, kind of making sure she gets out of the house. I mean, this probably happens all the time, and I don't know. It's just an odd thing, and I think it is. I don't know. I think it would be hard to feel like it's somebody that you could connect with and be with.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be with Tony, but I don't know. Well, I guess when they're about to kiss is in the next minute, so I shouldn't bring that up.
Oh yeah. Well, this one, I mean, the thing that I do think it's doing is it is setting up this romance, but also it's kind of this growing up that Tony is doing. As theoretically, we've seen him kind of growing up already in this film, going from this kind of cocky, arrogant playboy at the beginning who throws away his money and is with different girls all the time. And then he ends up getting caught by these terrorists, and it's really kind of changed him and affected who he is. Now he's in this place where he's growing up a little bit, and we don't know exactly what he's doing with this suit that he's doing. At this point, it just seems like he's kind of building something for fun. But certainly, it seems like he's getting a little more serious, maybe leaving some of these Playboy ways behind him. I think that's actually an interesting element to his character. But I do think that Pepper brings up a good point, and I like that she doesn't just fall for him. Because if she just fell for him, it would just I would lose a lot of respect for her. She doesn't just fall for him right away, and by not doing that, it forces him to kind of continue cleaning up and become a better person still. And it's not just an easy switch to flip. He actually has to go through and do quite a bit of work to actually win her over, and I think that's nice.
Yeah, just what you're saying there made me think. It almost seems like that Tony didn't realize how important Pepper was to him until after he came back from captivity. Like he was
right.
Yeah, just taking her for granted. But now he's like realizing, like as he says in the scene, that he can't do anything without her.
Right. Well, and that's actually a great point, because there is a moment that I had forgotten about, but when he is getting tortured, and we have that moment where the Ten Rings terrorists are kind of dunking him and torturing him. In that moment, he's got a flash of the arc reactor, but we also hear a cry of Pepper saying, "Tony!" Which I think the audio they probably pulled from the end of the film and just used that line in there. But it is interesting because you're hearing Pepper calling his name in that flash, and it is a moment like kind of this connection with her, and I think that's a very valid point. He's realizing that she's a much more important person in his life. I like that.
Yeah.
Now on the balcony in the script, it's Pepper has this this horrible line or this monologue. Really, let me read it to you real quick. So Tony and Pepper under the stars, close together. Pepper: "I'm sorry I was so uncomfortable. I hate being the center of attention like that. And that's why this one time in high school when I was supposed to be in a play, no, never mind. But that's why I never wanted to have a big wedding, because I thought everyone would be looking at me wearing a dress. Oh, no. I'm not saying like wedding. No, not like that. I'm just saying, it's like,
oh boy.
Wow.
That almost seems like, I don't know, teenage girl, something in a Breakfast Club or a movie like that.
I don't know.
I'm very glad they didn't use that.
I like to think that Gwyneth Paltrow came in and just like, no, I'm not going to say this. This is pretty silly.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, weren't they ad-libbing quite a bit during the making of this?
There was some ad-libbing. I think a lot of that came from Robert Downey Jr. Gwyneth Paltrow has said that she had a much harder time with that. And I just don't think that she felt as comfortable doing that. I think she prefers to have everything written out based on what I read. And I think that ended up working nicely with how these characters came across, because she feels a little more uncomfortable with the way that he's constantly throwing randomness her way, and I think it really works to their characters in the story.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I don't think I have anything else for this minute. Our scene is going to continue tomorrow as they have a little bit more interaction going on. But yeah, do you have anything else for this minute?
No, not really. Just like you were saying, that shot of Coulson, the bartender behind him, that's really weird.
He is so funny. I've not been able to find anything that identifies who he is, but he's a background actor. He was in there earlier when Tony came up to the bar to get a drink.
Yeah.
And we'll see him again. And I don't know, he's just very smiley, and he's so lit. Like that bar, it's a lit bar, so obviously it's casting its light up onto him, but there's so much light on his face that it's almost like becomes the center of attention. You're looking at Coulson, but then I always find myself drawn to his like glowing smile next to him.
Right. Yeah. It's much, much brighter corner of the frame. But yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, that's it.
Well, Jared, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah. Anytime.
Where can people find you on the internet and learn more about the podcast that you're on sometimes?
So it's the Epic Marvel Podcast. There's a website, and you could also follow Curtis on Twitter at the Epic Marvel Podcast. And
Curtis being the main host of the show,
yes,
right?
Yeah. Curtis Findlay. And I show up, I don't know, 2 or 3 times every year, and I discuss Captain America, Black Panther, and X-Men, X-Factor. Follow me on Twitter if you want. I usually use that for complaining these days, but I think my Twitter handle is @GoatGoblet.
The good old Goat Goblet.
Yep, good old
I love it.
Goblet. Yeah, means nothing, but nobody ever takes it, so I'm the only one.
So there you go. Hey, that works out well for you then. All right, everybody. Well, that is it for today's show. Thanks so much for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe to the show for free at marvelmovieminute.com. Join us over in our Discord chat room and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at The Next Reel. And if you like what we do and you want to support us and get some cool stuff, become a patron over at patreon.com/thenextreel. Until next time, true believers. Hey guys, this is Andy here. Just wanted to give you a heads up. Unfortunately, we ran into audio issues with Jared's audio, and the audio for the rest of the week just wasn't usable. So Pete and I had to jump in and just kind of record the episodes ourselves. We apologize to Jared, but certainly check out their podcast, and we hope to have Jared back on a future show.